The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, recently announced that he's expanding the ULIS scheme, and then after receiving a lot of backlash in recent weeks, he said that he's going to give grants and reductions on this ULIS fee. Is this him doing what's best for people? Is this him changing his mind and buckling under pressure?
Well, I think I would like to hear Ivan's answer because it's his former party and there is a huge schism in his former party between the leadership and Sadiq Khan. First of all, any such scheme, while the idea is noble that okay, we need clean air, and I was listening to a few arguments that Sadiq Khan is saying that clean air is a right and basic human right, which I understand, but then clean air in London is a basic human right, but what about the air is, you can't block air from coming from other areas. Like, it's not like you can build a wall in London and make sure air doesn't come from other areas. He's expanding to that area. What happens to other areas where there is polluted air? And the whole argument here is climate change, basically. And yes, air can affect like asthma and all those medical conditions, but in terms of climate change, the fact that he's taking such a radical step at a time of cost of living crisis, it's just it's sad because the people are struggling.
So do you think he's buckling under pressure when he's announcing these new schemes of reductions and grants?
Well, he has a re-election idea. Well, he has a re-election campaign coming up next year. Although he's likely to win, he's like more than favorite. The book is having more than favorite to win. But I think he's just doing that, like just more like an election measure. I think that's more an election campaign measure.
Do you think he is buckling under pressure, or is it just more for elections?
I think it's more for elections. I don't think he's buckling under. If he was gonna buckle under pressure, he would have withdrawn it like Andy Burnham did.
He can't properly withdraw because then he loses no face. So he's saying he's continuing, but just giving a lot of people grants.
Well, I think that's more election measure.
Yeah.
That like just before the election, I'll give you 2,000, just exchange your car for that.
Yeah.
Like it's just like a grant. But Boris had that before he extracted in 2022. Between 2019, especially in 2019 when he became prime minister, there was the electric car grant, which I was beneficiary of, £5,000 if you were buying an electric car that costs under 40,000. So I think he's trying that.
Yeah.
But I think that's more an election measure. But look, if it helps people, great. But I don't see. Look, I drive an electric car, so I know how much it costs. I don't see how 2,000 will bridge that gap, because most of the people that this measure is going to hit is like hardworking, self-employed people. Has technology gone that far? Because some of these people travel a lot of distances, like 100, 200 miles a day at times even. So do we have electric vehicles for self-employed people that will have all their tools and everything? A lot of things need to be tested. I think now Sadiq Khan, it has come into, as you said, saving face in a way where he's fighting his own party, he's fighting the Tories, he's fighting everyone. He's been blamed for an election loss by Labour leader himself. So he's like, okay, I'm going to get a face-saving way, but he won the court case. So he's like, okay, I won the court case, I'll go ahead anyway. But I'll also give something back, in a sense, for the election.
So what do you think happened?
Well, I think he's listening, isn't he? Look at the election result. It's clear that you have to listen to the way the public are feeling about all of this. Yeah. And on the one hand, there's a great coalition of people who accept that climate change is one of the biggest challenges facing the world, and we have to do something about it. On the other, people are being squeezed and squeezed due to the cost of living crisis. And there's a time that people are being squeezed. If you ask them to pay more tax for anything, they're going to say no. It's pretty obvious. It's like when we Labour proposed a penny on national insurance to pay for extra money for the NHS. The economy was growing, people's standard of living was doing well, the vast majority of the public supported it. When they proposed congestion charging in Greater Manchester, there was a referendum, I don't know if you remember that, it was in the middle of tough economic times. I think 89% of the referendum voted against congestion charging. It tells you all you need to know. The bottom line is this, we have to do something about climate change. But also, the contribution, Britain needs to show some leadership, but the reality is, what Britain does is like a needle in a haystack compared to what China and India and Brazil and the United States, all of these major world economies need to contribute towards the fight against climate change. So of course we need to do our part, we need to do our bit. And there's a lot that we can do that's positive. We should be creating green jobs, we should be taking advantage of the green agenda to create jobs around the country and invest in growth. We've heard that word, growth. The government doesn't really have a credible growth strategy. However, on back to this issue, The bottom line is this, that as I say, we have to understand right now that people are having, and I think...
So do you look at this as him
some-
listening and then taking a step back and say, I've listened and now he's helping?
Well, I think he has to. I don't think he has a choice. Otherwise, it would be like a kamikaze pilot saying, well, you know, I'm blind or deaf to the views clearly of the public feel. Look, the public accept. Look, I remember the outrage over recycling, you know, bin collect and all that. A lot of those people now are happy and understand their responsibility to recycle. Okay, it's inconvenient, but they do it and they believe that they ought to do it. There is a greater sense of responsibility and an understanding that the threat is real, is serious of climate change, right? But if you start saying that the response to that is to tax ordinary people who are already struggling, who are already up against it, I'm afraid to say they are not going to want that right now. And I totally understand why. And if politicians don't get it, don't hear that message, then I'm afraid to say there's going to be a price to pay. So Sadiq is right to listen, he's right to get the message, if you like, and the mitigation measures he's taking, hopefully, will enable those people who are struggling to feel that he's not putting too much of a burden or too much pressure on them.
Well, I'll say this: the threat of climate change is real, but also the threat of getting voted out. Although in his case, not real.
He's not going to get voted out.
He's not going to.
Yeah,
He's
unlikely.
Well, the Conservative candidate did some research, Susan Hall, looked at no Instagram account, nothing, and then Sadiq Khan, I think it's 2 million followers or something, isn't it? It's just, he's got such a large
But
voice.
Ivan, I want to ask you a separate question here, and maybe.
In a way, the interesting point about this, if that's right, it's to his credit greater that he's willing to listen.
Yeah.
Because if a politician it was neck and neck and they really feared losing, then I guess, you know,
That's a good point.
so suppose. But the truth
Depends
is,
how much
the
this
truth
of a
is,
threat.
look, the truth, I think Tony Blair intervened in this debate last week, and he said this, look, we've got to take climate change seriously. It's one of the greatest threats facing the world. Let's not be in denial about it, but equally, if you tax people too much at a time when they're struggling, it's a big mistake. I think that's what more or less Tony Blair said.